Yeah, there we go. Good afternoon. 1 minute past for me. Let me plug in. Maybe. Sorry, Instagram. Oh, yeah, sorry, Facebook. There's my big hand. Just gonna try to plug this in. Woo! I'm amazing. So professional. There we go. Okay. Here we are. My laptop is having a day. I'm very, very scared that my laptop is gonna crap out on me soon. I'm gonna have to buy a new one. I don't want to yet. But it is old. All right. Come on in. What? Come on in. Let's talk. Good afternoon. Dr. Shannon Coates here. Please feel free to just call me Shannon. My name, already said that. Great. I'm a singer. I'm an educator and a voice pedagogy maximizer. You're welcome. A maximizer of the old pedagogy. So yes, I'm coming to you live from north of Toronto. Normally I would do a land acknowledgement. I am in a slightly different setup today because of said laptop, so I just want to acknowledge that I am on. Sorry, 5 seconds. There we go. Colonized land. I will acknowledge that. I don't have all of the text in front of me, so I will keep it at that. I'm grateful. Yeah, so here we are. Here we are. Weird topic today. These are the live office hours. Weird topic today. Something that's sort of been percolating in my head. And so now I'm just gonna, let's see how it all kind of percolates out from a face, shall we? Let's see. I'm talking about, well, the title is Do Your Research. And this is a phrase that you will see in the broader community, of course. Culturally, we'll see that quite a lot on social media. People are like, oh, if you just did your research, do your research. And we see that, coming out pretty regularly in the broader context and in the broader culture. And then I also wanted to talk about that kind of the idea of do your research and the idea of what that kind of means in pedagogy, in voice spaces and pedagogy, and understanding teaching and voice spaces. So I wanted to talk about it in voice spaces. So two issues I have with the saying, just do your research. One issue I have with the sort of with this thing that we kind of bandy about, and we sort of use it as a put down, to people, and we sort of go, well, they just didn't do their research. My one issue, I have two issues with this saying in particular, and the kind of attitude, the reason we use it as well, right? I have two issues with it. One is this, that first of all, especially in voice spaces, unless you are an actual researcher, scientist, researcher, your research is not going to be robust, right? We're not going to have robust research. We're not going to be, we're going to learn stuff, it's all good, but we're not going to have, and who do we trust as the actual experts, right? Who are the people that we're going to for the information that we think we should have when we're doing our research? It's very challenging. We've got these sort of evidence-based, we've got science-informed, we've got, I've got some notes here. Believe it or not, I took some notes today just to make sure I stayed on track, because it's a big topic, it's a big thing. So we have all of these methods and all of these different ways of talking about voice and talking about how to teach, and we have lots of educational models. And in voice, when we're talking about voice pedagogy, we're talking about both how to teach as well as the actual instrument, right? And science of sound and like neurology. And like we're talking about, there are so many factors involved. We're talking about pedagogy too. And so I'm not sure that it is possible for anyone to do their research in a way that would satisfy, you know, that saying where I'm like, oh, well, if you just did your research, you would know. Maybe, but maybe not. In fact, unlikely, because it doesn't matter who you go to. There's like some people will say that this is the thing that you should be thinking about and you should be doing. Some people, this is the thing. Like they're so what research are we doing, and who are we listening to, and what is their bias, right? We're in this, yeah. And then the second, in voice in particular, right? So if I am listening to, say, voice researchers, actual voice scientists, some of the, you know, the Christian Herbst, for example, I'm listening to some of these voice scientists, great. The actual research that we're doing for voice, like we're talking, these studies are like this big. The studies are this big. The research that we're talking about, and lots of the people who are interpreting that research, and this is the next thing, lots of the people who are interpreting that research, are negotiating with that research and coming to conclusions based on the kind of teaching and the singers. Yes, Sarah, the fanciest voice researchers in the world will tell you, we know so little about the voice, 100%. And also, does knowing more about the voice actually make you a more effective teacher? No, absolutely not. It absolutely does not. Those two, knowing lots about the voice and about anatomy and physiology and how the voice works, that doesn't impact necessarily the quality or effectiveness of your teaching or of the learning of the singers you're working with, right? Like these are two separate things. Knowing lots about the voice, what am I doing my research? Anyway. And the second, like I said, the second issue that I have is that the people who are interpreting the data, the people who are looking at the research and who are working to apply it, are applying that data through, or coming to conclusions, if you will, through their own bias. Of course, they are, but in many cases, so in larger fields, broader contexts, the folks who are interpreting the data usually, often, many times, are able to articulate how they are viewing the research and what their bias is, what they're bringing to the table, what the lens is through which they are viewing the research. In voice worlds, the vast majority of the people who are interpreting the data for us and who are either doing the research and then bringing it to the pedagogy world at large or voice world at large are interpreting data. First of all, we're doing research on for the most part, on 6 people, and often they're sort of, usually Western classical singers. Usually, we're not necessarily doing data on, we're not actually doing research on the folks who the vast majority of independent voice teachers actually work with in their voice studios, right? Especially folks who work in a sort of, who are generalists, if you will, who are working with lots of different singers of different ages, varying levels of coordination, lots of different goals, lots of reasons for taking voice lessons, and lots of different styles. Lots of styles. Mostly not Western classical singers. Mostly not. And lots of ages, right? So often what happens when we're interpreting this research, when we're interpreting the data, we are applying it really specifically, or we're interpreting it really specifically through this lens of working with Western classical singers who are of a specific coordination level, and who are, adults who are in this sort of 18 to 24 range, possibly a little older, but in that range of singer. And we're interpreting this data, and we are giving information, we are coming to conclusions based on our bias, which is that, first of all, I am a Western classical singer. I've only been trained in Western classical styles, and I've only done Western classical style training in academia, and that's who I teach as well. So you can see that that is a bias. So what happens then is we get this data, wonderful data, and folks come to a conclusion based on that data, but the conclusion that they come to is heavily biased and heavily through their lens of working with this very specific segment of the population. And that segment of the population is not who the vast majority of independent voice teachers who are working, you know, we're working in our subdivision, we're working in a, you know, like the vast majority of independent voice teachers are not working with this population. And so then we do our research, and we are not, you know, we're singers, we're voice teachers, and we are not necessarily thinking critically about the bias or the lens through which this research and this data is presented. And so we take this on as, okay, I've done my research, but we are not necessarily able to come to a different conclusion from the data. So let me give you an example. An example of something like this is, or an example about this is, Lynn Helding's book, love much of what is in that book. What's it called again? It's called The Musician's Mind. My book's over on the shelf. Musician's Mind. Lots of incredible data about learning and about, you know, how we apply to music and learning music. Lots of incredible data in that book. I would say that I came to different conclusions than Lynn did from the same data about how to apply that data in probably 60 to 75% of her conclusions, right? So the things that Lynn is talking about in terms of how we apply this data, how we know, so we have this data, we have this information, and how do I apply this data in real life, in teaching situations, working with singers, how do I apply, and musicians, how do I apply this information that we have? I came to radically different conclusions in many cases than she did in her book. I'm not saying okay, so she obviously did more research than I did. I just took the same data that she presented in the book, right? And then came to a different conclusion. Many of the voice pedagogy textbooks, that's an example that is heavily, you know, there's lots of research in the actual text, and that's just an example, but the vast majority of the voice pedagogy textbooks that I have and have read and go through and use, I have come to very different conclusions about how to apply the information and how to use the information that's in those textbooks than the authors have come to in those textbooks. And you're allowed to. It doesn't mean I didn't do my research necessarily. It means that I came to a different conclusion. So this is my issue. This is one of my big issues with the do your research line of the do your research sort of crowd, right? Is that maybe I did do my research and I just came to a different conclusion than you did, right? And that is fine. We are allowed to come to different conclusions based on the data that is there or the data that is offered. And often, again, in pedagogy, when we're talking about voice world, we are often talking about the experts who we are often working with experts and information from experts, conclusions from experts who are not necessarily super aware of their own bias, right? They're not necessarily super aware of the lens through which they are interpreting their data. And so then the conclusions that they're coming to from the research that they have done, the conclusions that they're coming to are not necessarily the conclusions that someone else would come to, but we are not in a science field. And so we do not have the same sort of like, let's see whether or not this is actually the conclusion that we can come to from this data, right? We're not in that field. So we don't necessarily think that way, right? And most of us have come out of a Western classical, many of us have come out of a Western classical tradition and out of a Western sort of idea, it's not just Western, but out of this idea of like master apprentice, you know, prestige economy. Michelle Markwart Deveaux has been talking about prestige economy for quite a while, for a little while now. Take a look at her stuff if you haven't already. I'm just going to write down that I did that. to tag her. So what we end up doing as independent voice teachers and as folks who are in the trenches, so to speak, and who are working with a very different population is we just kind of take the information because we're just trying to get the information. We just want to learn. We just want to be better teachers. But we are not, because it is not explicitly said, this is the lens through which I have come to these conclusions. These are the things that I have, I am saying these things because of my bias, and I acknowledge that this is my bias, and this is the lens through which I am giving you these conclusions. We don't necessarily realize or think critically about the fact that, wait, this information may not actually be that useful to me, or this conclusion, the way of applying this information may not actually be useful in the studio I work in, because I work with 6-year-olds, or I work with belters, or I work with singer-songwriters, or I work with aging voice, or I work with like all of these other singers who we work with. Not necessarily, that data is not necessarily the conclusions that folks who do not work with that population or have not worked with that population come to is biased, right? It's through a different lens. There's nothing wrong with bias. The issue is when we're not acknowledging the fact that we have it and we're not articulating the fact that this is where I sit, this is my position, and also here are the reasons that this position came about. So I'm coming to these conclusions because this is the lens through which I see the world. Right. So yes. So that's my issue with that. Let me just say, how does this play out in voice and in voice spaces? So I talked a little bit about that already. We've talked a little bit about how does this play out in voice spaces. So this plays out in voice spaces in this way. Let me give another example. Let me give an example of, and then go into voice spaces. So another example is this. We will read in textbooks, we will hear from pedagogy folks, from pedagogues, we will read in voice pedagogy texts, we will see the studies about a balanced onset, for example, right? So a balanced onset, and there is an assumption from research around what a balanced onset is. And a balanced onset, when you see it in a textbook, almost always is the onset or the start of the sound that leads to a Western classical tonal outcome. So the positioning that allows for, and the instigation of the sound, if you will, that allows for a Western classical tonal outcome. And we hear over and over again, okay, so the balanced onset, and we internalize, and this is a good thing, and if you don't have a balanced onset, you run the risk of getting nodes, or of overpressurizing, or having blah, 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 like all of these other things that are, that could be bad, right? If you're not working on onsets, then you are not a good voice teacher, blah, 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 right? So we hear all of this information about, for example, something like a balanced onset. And if we're not critical about it, if we're not thinking to ourselves, okay, where is this person coming from? What is the conclusion? And it's okay if you're not critical about it. We were not taught to be critical about these things, to think critically in this way. We were taught that the people who are in academic positions and the people who have their doctorates, happens to be me, but the people who have, have done the research and the people who have done the thing, they know the thing, right? And I am just a lowly independent voice teacher, and I work with 8-year-olds, and so I don't have the, how would I have the knowledge to, I can't do that research, right? But you are allowed to come to a different conclusion from the research. You are allowed. Anyway. So balanced onset means something different to someone. There is an assumption of what that means to someone who is working in, who is looking at things through that lens, versus someone else, like myself, for example, who's working with very young singers, who's working on belting, who's working on pop styles. Balanced onset means whatever the onset is that gets you the tonal outcome that you want with the most ease. for you. That's what balanced onset means. And balanced onset can mean lots of pressurization. It can mean that it sounds like, to start with. 100% it can. A balanced onset is whatever works for you, the singer, to get you the tonal outcome that you want with the most ease for your instrument. That's a balanced onset. Because I am looking at this research, I have come to a very different conclusion about the research, right? About what it means to have. Assess your sources 100%. Assess your sources. Yeah, absolutely, right? So I have come to a different conclusion, and it took me a while to actually come to that conclusion because I was Western classically trained. Of course I was. And of course I was. I have only had Western classical teachers, and I have only worked with folks for whom a balanced onset is the thing that gives you the tonal outcome that leads to Western classical tonal outcomes, that gives you the production coordination that leads to Western classical tonal outcomes. That's the only thing that is a balanced or good onset, right? Okay. That's another example, like I said. And there are tons of these examples all the way through where any textbook you pick up, any pedagogy textbook you pick up, there will be prescriptive descriptions within that textbook. I have not yet come across one that is anatomy and physiology based or diagnostically based or evidence informed or science informed or however all we want to talk about it, or evidence based or science informed, whatever. I have yet to come across one textbook that is not prescriptive through the lens of Western classical tonal outcomes and what the technical outcomes are for Western classical tonal outcomes, as those being the balanced ones, the good ones, the right way to sing, right? There is not one yet that I have come to. If you think there is one out there, I would send it to me. I would love to read that text. There isn't one yet that I know of. I've got a lot of them on my shelf. There isn't one yet. Anyway, okay. So how does this play out in the voice world in terms of the folks who I'm working with? How does this play out? So this plays out really consistently in the voice world in that the people who are working in the voice ped degree with me, we're going to start registration for that in about a month. So here we go. Here we go again. And people who come to me for pedagogy consults, which if that's something you're interested in, let me know, send me an email. Or who come to me for voice lessons with a pedagogy sort of like, with a pedagogy hint. Pedagogy, we could do, if you want to do some voice lessons where I'm talking about why I'm doing what I'm doing and how and why we're talking about and how we're working and the way we're working, let me know. I'll send you the info. The people who come to me for that work, and the folks in the BPUD, the number one pain point that folks articulate to me, the number one thing that they want, and the main reason that folks go and do, summer institutes and, the pedagogy institutes and the pedagogy courses, and part of the reason that I went back to school and did my master's in pedagogy and then of course the doctorate, but like the main pain point is that I feel that I do not have enough information yet. I feel that I can hear something that is happening, but I don't know what the process is. I don't understand what's happening yet. I can't describe why that's happening, and therefore I am not teaching effectively, or I'm letting my students down, or I am not, my students are not progressing in the way that I want them to, or they're not progressing in the way that they want to, or I can't fix problems when the singers come to me, or I can't diagnose what's happening when the singers come to me. And so we have lots of sort of methods, we have lots of different training programs, we have lots of different textbooks, et cetera, that promise to give us the information that we need, the research that promise to give us the information that we need in order to know what's happening in the voice so that we can be more effective teachers. Right? To see the connection between do your research. So we think, okay, I should be doing my research so that I can be a more effective teacher. And we get into this sort of like, okay, this is, if I do this formula, if I do this set of steps in this order, there are some methodologies out there where, like, if I do this set of steps in this order, like I assess this, then I assess this, and then I assess this, and then I assess this. If I do this set of steps in this order, then the singer will be better, and I will have fixed problems. I will have diagnosed and then prescribed, and I will fix the problems because I did my research and I have all of this knowledge about how the voice works, right? And I can describe the process, I can see what's happening technically, I can understand and describe it, and so then the singer, I can change the way that they're singing, and so then, or I can change the function, I can change the process, and so then they will be better singers, and I will be doing my job, and I will be doing right by the singers I'm working with. Yes, this is a big reason that I went back to school myself, 100%, because I wanted to get that information so that I could serve the singers I was working with better. Yeah? That is a huge pain point. That is a main reason that singers, that voice teachers come to work with me. And then we start to work with, so two issues with that. I've talked about diagnosis, the diagnosis and prescribe method, the diagnosis and prescribe philosophy of teaching a few times before. There is I think it's called diagnosis. Pedagogy over diagnosis, I think. There is a live office hours on that somewhere around. Also, the VoicePed 101 library is opening soon. And in that, you will be able to view Diagnosis 101, which is a whole class on divesting yourself of the diagnosis and prescribe methodology or understanding of pedagogy, which is not my favorite, and I do not think is a useful way to teach voice. I know, right? I know. Because here's what happens. So we think if I just do my research, so we have, first of all, we have the pain point that I am not doing enough. I don't know enough, and I don't understand the voice well enough, and therefore the singers I'm working with, therefore I don't have all of the exercises I need, I don't have all of the prescriptions I need, I don't have the information to prescribe things so that they will change. Therefore I'm not doing my job. I'm letting the singers down, right? And they're not progressing, or I'm not, whatever. Right. So then if I just do my research and I get more information, then I will be able to do my job, which is to tell the singers what is wrong with them and how to fix it so that they can sing better and they can be, they can move along on they can progress. Right. Two issues with that. One, the first issue is exactly what I was just talking about. If you are getting your anatomy and physiology information from someone who does not acknowledge their bias and who is not able to, who doesn't work with the folks who you work with, then they will have come to different conclusions about how to apply the information that they have than you, because they're looking at it through this very specific lens. Yeah? So that's one issue. The second issue is this, that diagnosis and prescribe model is not effective teaching. Oh, there's a third issue. Here's the third issue. You can never know enough to know what's happening in their voice. I've been teaching a long time. I've got lots and lots of really good information. I often have a good idea of what needs to change or what we would like to change or how to find something different in the voice. I often have a very good idea of how and what is happening. But I've done a lot of work to get that information and had a lot of experience to get that information. It is unlikely that the vast majority of independent voice teachers are going to get that information. So what happens? We get into a singing, we learn more about anatomy and physiology. We understand more about how the voice works. We understand more about acoustics. We understand more about neurology. We understand more about learning. We understand more about all of these things, but we miss the pedagogy part. We miss the actual, how do I communicate this information? And because we've had Western classical training, we do not trust both ourselves as teachers to make these sounds, and we do not trust the singers we're working with to be able to make these sounds. Western classical training. Oh, yes, yes. I'll just read that. Let me just read that out loud. As a former RN who practiced in a very evidence-based practice environment, now turned newbie voice teacher, this is so what I need to hear and reflect on. Yes, yes, please do, please do. Because it's not about, and also this is the same in the medical field, right? In the medical field, there is I think it's changing, of course, but there is this understanding that the medical practitioner knows more about your body and about what to do to change it or fix it or heal it than you, the singer, does. And if we have come up through Western classical training, or if we are in a sort of evidence-based kind of framework or a diagnostic framework, what happens? I think that all what I need in order to be an effective voice teacher is to be able to tell you what is wrong and to tell you what you're doing, what the actual physiology of what you're doing is and how to change it. And I do not trust you to know. I do not trust your experience of the sound and of creating the sound. And I don't trust my own experience of creating the sound. Because I came up all the way through Western classical training where someone else told me what to do and how to make that sound. And there is an aspect of Western classical training, because of the complexity of the coordination that is required to make those sounds, where we need a coach, we need someone outside of ourselves. These are not sounds that we will make intuitively, unless you're Julia Child. You might make those sounds intuitively if you were Julia Child. They might be part of the way that you speak and your natural way of speaking if you're Julia Child. But nobody is Julia Child except Julia Child. The rest of us, our intuitive way of making sound is not going to lead us naturally to Western classical training singing, right? It's really not. Look, whenever I hear whenever I hear someone saying, you really have to be careful when you're learning how to belt because you can really injure yourself if you're not careful, I know that they have had Western classical training and or that they have bought into Western classical ideals in terms of teaching and training. Because belting is intuitive to our bodies. We do belting. If you call for a cab across the street, you have just done the coordination to belt. Can you hurt yourself if you overpressurize, if you yell, lots of other things? Sure, of course. Can there be some injury? Of course. But 90% of the world is we are all using our voices in the ways, intuitively, in the ways, these are all sounds that we will make intuitively, that we already know how to make. So when I have someone coming into the studio where I am thinking, okay, I've got to understand exactly what's happening in that voice, and I have to have more information, I have to do my research, I have to know what's happening in that voice, I have to be able to diagnose, is the soft palate too high, is the soft palate too low, is there too much constriction, is it too open, is the tongue forward, is the tongue back, is the tension in the tongue in the root of the tongue or is it the front of the tongue, are they taking too much of an inhalation or are they taking not enough of an inhalation, is the inhalation too high, are they holding too much, is there too much pressure on the release, is there not enough energy on the release, is their jaw moving too much, is their larynx going up and down too much. As soon as I start to think of all of the processes, all of the things that are happening physiologically, what happens? I'm now diagnosing you, and now I have to come up with an exercise to change it. when in fact, which is the pain point, right? Because then what if I don't come up with the right exercise? What if I can't tell them exactly what to do to change it? What if I can't figure out exactly what to do? When in fact, and this is a big revelation for lots and lots of the voice teachers I work with, when in fact, if I am listening to the sound and describing it in terms of the sound and what I want more of, rather than what is happening physiologically, that is going to be your most effective way of teaching. So here's an example. One of the teachers I worked with in the VPUD, they can make themselves known if they would like to, but we were talking this week, and they were saying that they had, after 8 months, they're like, I think I finally have this. And to be clear, they have known this cognitively the entire time. They've had this information cognitively the entire 8 months. We start by talking about pedagogy, student-led learning, diagnosis. Like, we start there. That's where we start. And so they've had this information, and also they're a very intuitive, wonderful teacher already. So like they have this information. And they said, so I was listening to the singer based on what they wanted to do more, what the singer wants. I thought I would love for them to have a little bit more grounding. I think it was grounding. I would love for them to have a little bit more grounding. And rather than thinking, is it because the tongue is a little bit, is it because the breath isn't moving the way I want it to? Or is it because this isn't happening, whatever, these things aren't happening, blah, blah, blah. Rather than thinking, doing a diagnostic checklist, they said, what would bring more grounding? What do I want to do in my own body in response to the sound that this singer is making? My own body wants to go like this in order to get more grounding. Amazing. I'm just going to give them a TheraBand, and I'm going to say, they didn't say anything. I would love to hear more grounding. What would you like to hear more of in the sound? Just didn't ask anything like this. They said, what would happen if you take this TheraBand and you just stretch it as you're singing? Great. So they did it, stretched as they're singing that, and instantly, as if by magic, likely there was more vocal fold closure, likely there was a higher level of pressurization in the breath that led to and or was contributing to and or anticipated, yes, holistic somatic, right? And or anticipated the abduction of the vocal folds, and likely the vocal tract shaping changed in response to this different level of pressurization, etc., right? So yes, all of these physiological things are happening. If she had asked for, can you make that breath a little more pressurized? I'm pretty sure what's happening right now is we're not getting enough vocal fold closure, and that's because blah, 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 blah. Nothing. Who cares? And also, you can be wrong, very wrong, especially if you've only got a little smattering of anatomy and physiology, or you got a little bit from here, or you're listening to anatomy and physiology from someone who only works with Western classical singers, who tells you that you shouldn't pressurize. Okay, except that this is what this singer needed, is a little bit more pressurization, right? So rather than thinking, what is happening here that I have to fix? And what is the physiological thing that I have to fix? I'm literally just describing the sound. Okay, it was a little weak, maybe a little quiet. I would love for the sound to, I would love for her to be more grounded, and I would love for the sound to be a little stronger. What do I want to do in my own body in order to make the sound stronger? Whew, I want to do this. I'm going to ask the singer to do that. And the singer said, oh, that's different. What happened? And the voice teacher, who was kicking it up with the pedagogical principles, said, let's talk about that afterwards. Describe that for me. Wonderful. It was stronger? Great. I'd love to hear 3 or 4 more. How strong can it be? Tell me which one was the strongest. And they kept going, and that singer learned in the body how to coordinate to create that more robust sound. You don't need to know. You don't need to do more research. You don't need to know necessarily physiologically, anatomically, what is happening in the body, necessarily. What you do need, what will be useful for you, you can learn, of course. Please do. Please take all of the courses you want around anatomy and physiology. Just be critical about how you're applying that and the lens through which you think you are supposed to, through which you are learning it. Yeah, be critical about that. Understand that the folks who are giving you the information may or may not be able to articulate their bias. They may or may not be able to. They may be able to, but they may not be able to articulate their bias, right? So again, as soon as you hear someone say that we got to be really careful about learning how to belt, you know that there is a bias. That is a bias, 100%. We do not necessarily have to be careful about learning how to belt, because belting is part of what we do internally, instinctively. That coordination is part of all of our human beings. All of us human beings have done the coordination for belting before. We don't have to, it's not something that has to be carefully taught. It's something that we find and build on. Yeah? Okay. What was I saying? I was saying something about you don't have to describe the sound. You don't have to diagnose the sound. You don't have to diagnose what's happening in the sound. You don't have to figure out what's wrong. You don't have to have a magic formula of all of the structures and all of the systems that you should be addressing to make sure that the sound, to make sure that you're building on all of these, you're exercising and creating all of these different structures to make sure all of the systems are strong. You don't have to. You do not have to. Can, but you don't have to. And you don't have to memorize a whole bunch of, you don't have to memorize all of the, what connects to what in the body, and the fact that, my pelvis is connected through fascia to my larynx. Yes, I know that information, but you know what is going to be more, what's going to be more useful is if I notice within my body that every time I go, my pelvis connects. My pelvis locks. Every time I go, my pelvis locks. I just noticed that in my own body. Wait, that's interesting. What about if I ask the singer I'm working with, what happens to them when they go, how does your pelvis feel right now? How do your hips feel right now? What if I ask them? You will notice it in your own body. I will notice it in my body. If I trust my body and I trust your body, and if I trust you as a singer, if I trust myself as the singer, if I say to myself, what would I like to hear more of, and how would my own body start to do that thing? How would I set myself up? Notice what's happening. Oh, my shoulders feel heavier. That's interesting. I would love to hear what happens, see what happens if you imagine that you've got lots of weight on your shoulders. Let's just see what happens. I'd love to see what happens if your knees bend. I feel like I want to have a lot more pointiness in the sound. I want to have more twang in that sound. I'd love to have more twang. What's the thing? What do I do when I want to make a twangier sound? Oh, I think duck. Hey, what would happen if you were quacking now? Do I ask them to do I say, oh, there's not enough twanginess in the sound because they've got too much constriction and it's going up the nose and blah, blah, blah. Half the time it's not going up the nose. Twang is not about nasal. This is also the thing. We don't actually know what's happening. We think we do often because we think that we're supposed to and because someone has told us. We often do not know what's happening. Also, the voice is a holistic thing. If I'm focusing on one thing and changing one thing, so I'm going to change the breath now. Okay, but that may not actually, so maybe I do want more pressurization in the breath in order to have more, a stronger vocal fold adduction, and I also want to change the shaping. Maybe I do want to do those things. But if I ask you to change one system, the voice is a massive amount of tons of different systems all together. If I'm asking you to change one system, that is not going to be the solution. We want to look at the whole system. We want to give the system something to do. I want to see what my system does in order to create those sounds. I want to see what's happening. I want to ask for that. Yeah? So, doing more research, do your research. Sure, do your research. Or read your books, go to the people who are doing the research, talk to those people. Great, do all of those things. That's wonderful. Do the thing. And also, don't let the research and don't let the academic system, don't let prestige economy, don't let those things tell you that you can't trust your own body. That you have to that the only thing that you've got going for you as a teacher is if you can describe what's happening in the other singer's body. Half the time you cannot accurately describe it because it's literally not possible. You don't have a scope down their throat. You don't know what's going on. You're not looking at an MRI. You don't know what's going on. You have no idea which systems are involved in creating these sounds, right? You have no idea. So half the time you can't. Half the time we do not have enough information, or we have faulty information. You know that the soft palate can be down and you can still get a lofty sound with the soft palate down, right? That's a lofty sound. My soft palate is down. Yeah, you don't have to have the soft palate up to have a lofty sound. No, you don't. What? And you don't have to have the soft palate down to have a nasal sound. Like you don't have to. You don't have to. Lots of times the information that we have isn't actually good information. And then often the information that we have is filtered through a lens of singers. They've come to, the conclusions that have been come to are not applicable to the singers that we work with. Singers who we work with, right? Lots of times that information is actually filtered through a lens that is not useful. The conclusions are not useful for the singers who we work with. You don't need to do your research necessarily. What you do need to do is start to trust, if you want the permission, let me give you permission, to trust your own instincts. Start to name the sound in terms of what you would like to hear more of. So let me say, I was working with a voice teacher this week as well, where we were working, we were listening, we were observing a singer, just like a YouTube singer, young singer. And the two questions that I ask when I'm working with voice teachers is one, tell me, describe the voice and tell me what you would like to hear more of, right? So those are the two questions. You feel free to ask yourself those questions next time you're in the studio. And so we watched a video and then I asked the teacher, describe the voice and then tell me what you'd like to hear more of. And so always the instinct is to describe the voice in terms of, well, there's a very, like it's bright and it's forward and, they're using a really great breath support. They're using, the vocal tract is open. They've got do you see how I'm not actually describing the voice in those last couple of ones? What I'm describing is a process. Describe the voice. How do you know that the throat is open? What is the outcome in the voice, in the actual tonal outcome? How do you know that they are supporting or not supporting? What is the outcome? What do you hear? What is actually happening? What do you actually hear in the voice? Not what you think is happening or what you think the process is. Tell me about the voice itself. What do you hear? Trust your ear. Trust what you hear. Then tell me what you would like to hear more of. Well, and this particular singer said, well, I'd love to hear more roots. I'd love to hear more roots. Ooh, I love that. That's an interesting one. And so then I said, how do you know that you want to hear more grounding? Like I agreed. How do you know that you want to have you want the singer to have more grounding? Well, it was just a little flighty. It was like light. It wasn't blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, even simpler. How do you know? We couldn't get there. And then I said, that singer is walking all over the stage with absolutely no intention. Back and forth, up on their toes, back and forth, around and around. When you see, that is literally the simplest thing. How do I know that I want more grounding? Because that singer is not grounded. How do I know they're not grounded? Because they're walking around all over the stage. Okay, so then what would be your first, how would you ground? How would you find roots? Well, I might start to like go as, I don't know, I might think of myself as a big gorilla. That's what my body wants to do as soon as I think of grounding. My body wants to go into this like gorilla kind of sound. Terrific. That's what I'm going to ask that singer to do. I'd love to hear this song as if you are a gorilla. I don't have to figure out why they're not grounded. I don't have to figure out what, like, they don't have enough pressurization to make sure that the vocal folds are fully adducted, or to make sure that there's, you know, like a long closed quotient phase. I don't have to figure out, like, I don't have to figure any of that out. Because if I tell you the thing that I want more of, and I give you a way to find that in a holistic way, my whole body is going to respond and find that coordination. And then we go like, oh, did you hear my cat? My lucky cat. Little baby Jack Reacher. Where are you, little baby Jack Reacher? Oh my gosh. I don't know if I can. Can you see him? There he is. Sorry, Instagram, you can't see him, but Facebook can. Where are you? There you are. Oh my gosh! Just sitting there. Sorry, Instagram. I don't get to see him. Facebook did. Hi, Facebook. Sorry, you got to see. Anywho, the next time you are tempted to decide what is happening within the singer in terms of a physiological process, the next time you're tempted to say, well, the reason that I'm hearing this sound, I know that this is an unsupported sound. I know that this is, you know, there's tongue tension. Really? How do you know there's tongue tension? What are you hearing in the sound? What does the sound like? Does it sound like Kermit the Frog? Oops, let's see. There we go. Sorry. Does it sound like Kermit the Frog? Does it sound like swallowy? Does it sound okay? That may be tongue tension. It may not be. It may be constriction in the throat. It may be 4 other things at once. Maybe tongue tension plus. Am I going to work on tongue tension? No, I'm not going to work on tongue tension. I don't even know whether it actually is tongue tension or not. What am I going to work on? I'm going to work on, what do I want to do in order to find this released open sound, this loftier sound, this less, I always want to go for what I want to hear more of, right? Well, I feel like yawny maybe. Let's try yawny together. Okay. Feel free to do your research if you want to. Be critical of the source, yeah? Be critical of the source. Understand that you are allowed to come to different conclusions from the data than other people have come to. You are allowed. Yes, you are. And also, the next time you are thinking to yourself, I have to describe this sound, or I have to tell this singer what is going wrong in a physiological way, I have to describe the anatomy and physiology, and I have to give them something, an exercise to do. Stop for a minute. Ask yourself, what would I like to hear more of in the voice? Not what is happening in the voice, not physiologically. Do I want to hear more breath support? No. I want to hear maybe a louder sound. Maybe I want to hear a fuller sound. Maybe I want the sound to be chocolatey instead of silvery. Or maybe I want it to be silvery instead of chocolatey. I don't know. Maybe I want both. I don't know. What do I want to hear more of in the sound? And then what does my body want to do? What is my first instinct? And or what is a thing that will get me to that sound? What's a directive I can use in my body? A holistic directive I can use so that the singer I'm working with can discover the coordination for themselves without me describing all of the things that needs to happen, because I can't anyway. It's not possible. It's not possible. The amount of times that I have sat at the back of adjudications with singers where voice teachers or the back of festivals where adjudicators are saying things like, well, this is happening because of blah, blah, and blah, blah, and you're doing blah, blah, and blah, blah. And I'm like, no, actually, no, that is not what's happening, but okay, great. We do not have to be that person. You are not responsible in that way. You can get more information if you want. Obviously, feel free. Be critical of how you use it. Yeah? Be critical of who you're getting it from and how you use it. Okay. Good times. Reach out if you're interested in doing some VoicePed work. Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. Reach out if you're interested in doing some VoicePed work. I can send you the details on that. I work online. Reach out if you're interested in doing some voice lessons with voice teachers. I work with lots and lots of voice teachers, as you probably know, and if you wanted to work on your own singing and you wanted to work or figure out how to do something in your own voice that you would like to figure out, I work in a quite a pedagogical way. So we can do like 10% pedagogy and then talk about it at the end, or I can drop the pedagogy as we're going or whatever. I can work in that way. And like I said, the VoicePed 101 library is coming soon, where you can have a monthly subscription if you would like. I'm also going to have monthly subscription, and I'm also going to have a yearly, you can buy for a year and save. And I'm also going to have a big promo where you can pay for a lifetime membership. What? I know. It's going to be great. So that keep your eye out for that. And like I said, the VPod, which is the VoicePed Undegree, which is 9 months of mentored training for voice teachers, which is very exciting, very fun. We only have 1 month left in the class of 24, so June. I'm getting sad already just thinking about it because we grow really close. We're in and out of each other's studios, and we're talking about teaching all the time. We're talking about like the singers we're working with, and we're talking about how to, oh gosh. So we get really close, and I'm already anticipating how sad I'm going to be when I'm not talking. Anyway, it's fine. All right. Take good care, friends. Have a great weekend. Let me know if send me a note if some of this resonates, or if you sorry, there's big fingers there, and let me know how it works. You're so welcome. I'm really glad. And can't figure out how to finish on Facebook. Sorry. Oh, there.